Well, for more on all of that, I'm joined in the studio by Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Political Information Network and a senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. Joining us shortly as well from Manama in Bahrain, Abdallah Al-Junaid is a Bahraini columnist and geopolitical analyst. Eric, I'll start with you. I mean, Israel's given this deadline, hasn't it? March 10th, before it goes into Rafah, the last Hamas stronghold in Gaza. Hamas claiming today that talks will continue, but what's happening? Have the talks collapsed, do you think?
Well, two separate questions, but they're obviously intertwined. Is this one of these type of negotiations that nothing will happen until the last minute, 1 minute before Ramadan, or is this something that maybe Hamas has made a decision that they think they're losing, and what they really want to do is inflame the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and East Jerusalem, and hoping that distracts and that they can get another life out of that. We don't know. I mean, Hamas is not even telling us, in a negotiation, even with hostages, not to give proof of life, forgetting about just even who's alive, but to prove it, that it seems a little, ridiculous in the negotiations, that because Israel cannot deal with that, it's not a moral equivalence of what's going on there. As far as Rafah goes, Israel has not begun its humanitarian evacuation. I think from an American point of view, Israel should have been, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, knowing they had to go to Rafah in the Philadelphia corridor, building a tent city, showing that they're going to do this. I know, talking with high-level officials in your government, they have not decided on the final plan, and hopefully they're coordinating that with my government, but I think they don't realize that they are losing time going on, and that they should be, even during Ramadan, moving people out, even if they don't have kinetic actions in Rafah.
And with all of the pressure on Israel not to go into Rafah, I mean, the United States very much wants a deal before Ramadan starts. Just in the context of Vice President Kamala Harris's comments yesterday, calling for an immediate ceasefire, and then we just heard Secretary of State Blinken there as well. Do you see a hardening of the tone there? Do you think the U.S. is losing patience somewhat?
There's no doubt. Again, people have told me, I spoke to some real senior officials, that don't worry, we could always go into Rafah, and I'm saying there is a time that you cannot always go into Rafah. American still controls your supply lines, and if they want to slow walk it, they can. Israel must defeat Hamas in Rafah. It must get rid of the infrastructure. It must get rid of the terrorists, which will there will be an insurgency the day after, but that could be dealt with like what you do in Judea and Samaria. And so I think it's really important that if Israel does not is perceived by the Gulf states as a winner, as a victor, that will hurt Israel's, what Bibi would like to do, his legacy of increasing the Abraham Accords to bring in Saudi Arabia and who knows, Indonesia and all kinds of other places. If Israel looks weak, they're not going to want to be with Israel.
All right, Eric, thank you. Let's bring in Abdallah Al-Junaid. He is with us now. Thank you very much for being with us, Abdallah. And really high stakes right now. Here we are just a few days out from the start of Ramadan. I mean, if there is no deal, if Israel does go into Rafah, will this inflame the Arab world?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Laura. And definitely it's not going to go down as Netanyahu estimate. I think the whole world, and not just the Arabic world, who is opposing any further delays in reaching some sort of, let's say, a cessation of hostility at the present time.
But Abdallah, it was Hamas that rejected the most recent ceasefire offer. It's hard to see what else can Israel do at this point. I mean, Hamas has refused even to give a list of hostages who are still alive.
Laura, at the present time, I think the lack of transparency is a game that everybody is playing. At the present time, all we are hearing from mediator that this was rejected and that was rejected. But at the same time, have we seen the exactly what Israel is demanding of Hamas?
Eric Mandel, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, you know, this isn't a game. I was with the hostage families yesterday in the Knesset. These are souls, living souls, who are innocent civilians. 6 Americans are there. And so these are not bargaining chips. These aren't games. These are real lives. And when I go and have spoken and in the field with Israeli soldiers, right to left, secular and religious, the one thing is they feel the IDF must get back the hostages, and that is a defining thing here. But when you make it binary, hostages or defeating Hamas, most people are conflicted. So the hostages, this is no bargaining chips here, and I'd like my country to be clearer in stating that, you know, this is not a negotiation between 2 equal partners. This is radical jihadism and Hamas, and it is a democracy that was attacked.
Abdallah, you know, the Qataris are one of the main power brokers here. We just heard from the Qatari Prime Minister. He's in Washington right now. Are the Qataris negotiating in good faith? Could they be doing more to pressure Hamas?
Well, I think everybody is trying to do its most, including the United States, bringing this crisis to an end or to a conclusion that's going to be satisfying all parties, including the release of the hostages in the hand of Hamas. And at the same time, definitely the stop of killing of innocent civilians in Gaza. So the minute everybody come to terms in terms of, one, is the continuation of this war going to bring the hostages? I don't think so, unfortunately, nor would it bring an end to the death toll of Palestinians that has exceeded 30,000 so far.
And Abdallah, I mean, what is the consensus in the GCC countries? Is it that the war cannot go on, the war must not go on, there must be a permanent ceasefire imposed, even if that means that Hamas will survive?
Put it this way, Laura, I think the most important thing at the present time is where the Israelis stand. Has Netanyahu delivered any of his promises when he, entered this war? I know it is a war that was forced on Israel, but at the same time, did he deliver on any of the strategic promises he made to the Israelis? This is why I think what we need to do as a region to stop and reverse course and see what we can do collectively. If we're going to continue, prosecuting this war or accept Israel prosecution of this war, it's going to be disastrous. We are seeing the scene in Israel more than anywhere else in the world. And it is not just, the fragmentation is so deep. I mean, have you in your whole life have seen Israel living this sort of circumstances?
Well, it is the longest war in Israel's history, but there was nothing like October 7th at the same time. Abdallah, when you're talking about a regional solution, does that mean that the Saudis, the Emiratis, they are prepared to foot the bill for rebuilding Gaza? They are prepared to offer Israel security guarantees? Are they talking to the Egyptians? Are they coming up with a plan for the day after?
I will confirm one thing that is off the table: rebuilding Hamas as it has been done previously. What is on the table at the present time is the total rehabilitation of Gaza, people, buildings, and something that is linked to the future of those people and that part of the future of the state of Palestine. Well, we need everybody's help in this, including the Israelis. But Benjamin Netanyahu at the present time, he need to, as I said again, he need to start listening to his friends in the region, plus the prospective allies.
All right, thank you, Abdallah. Eric, would you agree with that? Is Netanyahu just pressing on regardless, not listening to his allies?
He is in an incredibly difficult position. He is talking, he wants to bring in those allies, absolutely. He is talking to a domestic base because he wants to stay in power, and there are people much harder to the right than he is. He has to talk to the American audience. He wants the hostages out. He wants victory. These aren't simple things, and honestly, I think if Benny Gantz was Prime Minister, and even Yair Lapid, I don't think they'd be prosecuting the war differently. I think they would be perceived differently. But the question is, getting the hostages out is not up to the Israelis. The real pressure that really could be played is America putting pressure on the Qataris. Qatar is the...
Well, why haven't they put more pressure on the Qataris?
The Qataris have been they have a very strong lobby in the United States that works on both sides of the aisle. It's been their monies that have funded universities that have disproportionately more anti-Semitism. They trained Hamas policemen. They funded radical Islamism, but yet they've been able, for building an American base, Al Uwaid, to make it that they are, America's best friend. I think there's going to be the day after. There's not only the day after of Gaza, I think it's going to be a day after that there's going to need to be a reckoning of asking Qatar to move away from Iran, move away from radical Islamism, and they can't have it both ways.
All right, Eric, thank you. Abdallah, I mean,